My name is Danielle Trollinger, and I'm 30 years old, and today is June 3rd, 2018, and I'm speaking with my grandpa, Bill Bierling, who is my grandpa. I'm reading this. He's my grandpa, in case you're wondering. And we are recording this interview in Portland, Oregon. All right, Grandpa, can you tell me a little bit about your childhood and what you were like as a child?
Well, I was born in 1938, and I was born in Denver, Colorado. And I grew up in Denver for my whole high school years. And in Denver, I was attending the Denver Christian school system. My childhood was very routine at that time. I did a lot of just playing by myself and doing things like going for a walk and then down into a creek and catching crawdads and bringing them home. Also just learned at that time how to hunt for golf balls with my father, and we would go into a lake and get golf balls out, and that became a part of my life for the rest of my life in various times. My childhood was just very, very simple and nothing complicated about it. Although I did have an accident when I was a little child. I think at 4 years or 5 years old, I'm not quite sure. And I was coming home from kindergarten, and I walked in front of a bus that had stopped for a passenger, and when I walked around the front of the bus, I was struck by a car.
Oh my gosh.
And I was hospitalized. I didn't have any broken bones, but a lot of bruises and abrasions. And I do remember at that time, instead of doing stitches, they put in those clamps, so I can still remember how they clamped my skin together to make sure that all the cuts and bruises closed. And so that was the one incident in my little childhood that I had that I don't remember much about it, other than I kind of remember being in an ambulance, and the rest of it I don't know. But that was one of the incidents that took place.
Oh yeah, that'd be very memorable. Did that hurt when they clamped?
You know, it's so long ago, I don't remember. I just remember that that all happened. And
yeah. And then how old were you when you started doing golf balls with your dad?
Oh, probably 8 or 9. I'd walk along with him.
Yeah.
And then when I got into high school ages, I was much more involved. It just became a lifetime habit, occupation, whatever it might be, that we did to raise money for missions in Africa.
Yeah, and your brothers too joined at a young age.
My brother joined, and we've been doing it since my father passed away. We've been doing it ever since. So it's a 70-year history of hunting golf balls.
And
but
always,
it started with a little kid.
Yeah, and always at the same golf course?
The one is always the same on Cherry Hills Country Club in Denver.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Can you tell me about your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your parents? Like, take me through who they were, your relationships with them.
Did not know my great-grandparents, but my grandparents, my grandma on the one side, and my mother's, my dad's side, my grandma, never did know. She had died young, and he had remarried, and she also died young. So I knew my grandpa Bierling from my dad's side, and he worked at Denver University, and he was a custodian at Denver University. An interesting thing about him was that he was in Chicago, and he would follow the tram that went around with the horses pulling them, and he was a pooper scooper.
The original pooper scooper.
And he would pick it up as it went down the street, and then that converted him into being a custodian at Denver University. My mother's side, my grandpa and grandma, I knew them well. I worked for my grandpa. He worked for Schwader Brothers, which was making Samsonite luggage. And I worked for him for 2 summers when I was in school. unloading lumber from boxcars that went into making the suitcases for Samsonite. And my
Huh.
grandma, I just remember her always sitting in the corner, just kind of reading, very quiet. And I'd sleep over there once in a while. I remember those sleep-ins, which was kind of nice. And then we'd always play dominoes together. And it's a real strong memory. I was just a little boy, and I remember sleeping there at night, and I would always have to say, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, pray the Lord my soul to keep." And that was always frightening, because I thought, if I should die before I wake, and I kept thinking as a little kid, I wonder if I will die. That was not a very good prayer for a little boy to be saying, because it doesn't have, I know they've changed the words today and it doesn't have that in it anymore, but that's a memory, because that was always at her house. So,
Yeah.
And my grandpa from my dad's side, that was a pooper scooper, we called him Chicky Grandpa, and I don't know why, but
Just
we
a
called
nickname.
him Chicky Grandpa. Because I think he must have had chicken, but I don't even remember those.
Yeah. And how about your parents? I knew Grandma Bierling, but tell me more about who they were like. And you said it mentioned a
My
little bit about
grandma?
your dad.
My grandma was a simple woman, had been born in Michigan,
Yeah.
and she worked on a celery farm where they had to get celery, and she was very, she didn't only finished 8th grade, which was
Yeah.
not kind of unusual then,
Yeah.
that they not do a lot of education. My dad was born in Chicago, Illinois, and he went on to go to the University of Denver, get a degree, I think it was in business. He was also, he loved running track, and he was a track star at Denver University in the mile and the 2 mile. But he became a prudential insurance agent. He loved just going out and visiting. In those days, the agent was just like a family doctor. They went door to door, or wherever their particular district was. He would go and he would knock on the door, and he'd get maybe 2 months worth of insurance payments for whatever insurance they had, and it was like 25 cents to $1.50, and he'd mark it in his book what they paid. They were very friendly people. And then he was in an Italian district, and they'd invite him in for dinner. So it was like the old family doctor, but he was a family insurance guy, and that's what he did for his life. But
And
he
knew his
loved
customers by name and who
He
they
knew
were and their
all-
stories, their relationships.
all their stories and all of that, and they got to enjoy them a lot.
Yeah.
And then he could still hunt golf balls, because he had his own little debit with it was Prudential Insurance Company. So
Yeah. And then what about your mom? What was your relationship like with her?
my mother was very, very I would say, very simple in life, and I think probably her kids were her best, and so she just. I think she doted on us. We would always go to her if later on, when I became a teenager, if I needed to, get the car or something. I'd always go ask my mother.
You knew who to ask.
Go ask my mother to ask my dad. So that kind of shows who she was. Mom, would you go ask her if I could have the car tonight?
One of my fondest memories of her is that she loved whipped cream. And we'd always go get whipped cream or ice cream with her.
I know she became known for that at that restaurant, They'd pile it on, it was so thick, and we'd all just sit there laughing. It was like a big mount, look like Mount Hood that we're looking at over there.
Yeah. A mountain of whipped cream. Tell me about like a teacher or another adult that really shaped and formed you, that had a big impact on your life while you were growing up.
Probably 2. One was a principal, and most of them didn't like the principal, but he was an English teacher. It's also the principal, pretty strict.
Yeah.
But because I was a good student, he always favored me. So I was able to learn English, which I love English, which helped me later on. I loved English. I loved him as a teacher. He was strict, but because I was that good student, I got along with him. And one of the things that's a memory, his wife also taught there, but she only taught a half a day. Because he trusted me so much, he had me take his wife home at noon when she left in his car. And so I got to drive his Ford car and bring her home at noon. And then I came back into study hall, and of course all the kids were like, "You big brown noser." The other teacher was a German teacher. He was very unpopular, but he was a bachelor kind of guy. He taught German. But he's the one that said to me one time after I'd given a chapel talk, he said, "You know, you ought to be a preacher someday." And that stuck in my mind from a teacher, unpopular teacher at that, but I remembered it later on in life. He said that even though I had no idea that's what I wanted. I was a very shy kid, very nervous about standing up in front of people, but he was the one that said, "You ought to be a preacher," maybe from what I said in my chapel talk that day, which was I press on to the goal for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. I spoke on pressing on or something like that. And I guess he liked it, and that's what he said, and I remembered it. So those two
planted a seed.
The English teacher, and I had of course another teacher that influenced me was my basketball coach. So I played basketball for him for all the years in high school, and he was a good guy to be able to play basketball with.
Yeah. How did he, as a good guy, how did he shape you and as a coach?
I think that he was rather easygoing. He wasn't a very good coach, maybe because he let me play. Put me on the varsity. I liked him.
What are some of your most vivid memories of school, other than the people? Maybe an experience, or what was school like?
Well, I mentioned about being able to take the principal's wife
Yeah,
home.
I don't know if that would ever happen today.
Another one was there were 3 other guys, and we call ourselves the Big Four.
The Big Four.
4 seniors, and we kind of just thought we were maybe a little better than we were. And at lunchtime we would always go and we would climb on the roof of the school, and we climbed up the side of the bricks and sat on the roof to eat our lunch.
Oh, fun.
And that was always something we did, and that would never be done today, but we could scale the little wall and push each other up and sat in the wall and ate our lunch.
Oh, I like that. I wish my friends would have done something like that. That sounds like fun and a little rebellious. Can you tell me about some of the most important lessons that you've learned in life?
I think one is that it's important to try and have good relationships with kids, your classmates, to be just be as much as you can in good connection. Good relationships is probably the most important thing I've learned. If you don't have good relationships, you're constantly living in maybe resentment. You're living in it's just there's conflict created, and conflict's never good. So I tried to just be an easygoing, getting along, just hanging out with kids and trying to have good relationships.
Anything else?
I think that my goal myself was to be a good student. I thought that was important, to apply yourself and to do your best to try to do what you're called to do. Probably, I would follow the lesson plans pretty good. I didn't vary too much from them. And, maybe in that sense, I was what you might call a good student and a good little boy.
You followed along. That's good. You did your best.
I did my best.
You can always say you put forth your best work, and I think that probably feels good at the end of the day.
I did.
Are there any classic family jokes, stories, or songs that you can share with me from your side of the family?
Well, we were always country western fans, so I'd listen a lot to country western, and I'd listen to, because we didn't really have TV for a long time, so I'd listen to the radio. And I liked to listen to The Shadow, which was his program on Sunday afternoon. And I also liked to listen to The Lone Ranger and some of those radio shows, which
Yeah.
were the shows that you would listen to then. Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy,
Hmm.
those were radio shows, and I would go down into my room to listen to those radio shows. Also, I enjoyed just especially playing some basketball with my dad. We'd shoot hoops. He put up a basketball hoop in the backyard, and we would shoot hoops, and that was another thing I could do almost every day, is just shoot some baskets and with my dad. Yeah. We had an old 1933 Chevrolet car that he gave me to take me that I could take to school when I didn't walk, and it was an old 33, which was what. That puts me back a long time, Danielle. That's a long time ago when I'm driving a 1933 four-door little Chevy car. Yeah, that was a good thing.
Yeah. And then, are there any like bedtime songs that was sung to you, or any or that you sang to your kids, or even better yet, knowing you, what are some of your favorite hymns that you would sing to people that you still sing today? And can you sing them to me now? And tell me about why you like them.
I like almost all the old hymns. If there's anything that makes me, just inspires me for the day, or just gives me joy for the day, it's the hymns, the old hymns. Grew up singing them in church, and now I've been singing them since a little child, so that's almost 75 to 80 years I've been singing the hymns. Any one of them is a favorite of mine, but basically probably one today, it's got that little gospel, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. That song is one that is always a favorite, always be one that I sing, because it's got a nice upbeat, it's got nice words that we have victory. That would be one of the biggies that I grew up with. And some of the older hymns. What a friend we have in Jesus, all my sins and griefs to bear. That's another one. An old favorite, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Those are the kinds of ones I learned some in Sunday school that carry on throughout all of life, like Zacchaeus was a wee little man.
Oh yeah, I
climbed
remember
up in
that
a
one.
tree, and I'll make you fishers of men, fishers of men. Those we would sing those in Sunday school, and you know them forever. The
Yeah,
BRBLE,
back and forward.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the book for me. That's another one. Of course, Jesus loves me. All little hymns or little songs that you learned as a child that you carry with you all the way through your life, and there's so many of those. It'd be hard to say, but songs, melodies in your heart. In my heart there rings a melody. So that's another of the songs.
That's beautiful. Have you ever had a profound like religious or spiritual experience, and will you tell me about it? Other than just, I feel like life in general, Grandpa would say is a profound spiritual experience. But is there a specific one that?
Well, I grew up in the church, so and I went to church morning and evening, so it was a pattern of my life to be in church. I think that comment that was made by that teacher influenced me to eventually take courses that led to seminary, which led me into the ministry. I think in my ministry, when I went, probably the most telling incident was when we went to the Promise Keepers in Phoenix, Arizona for a conference, for pastor leadership conference, and we were called forth if anybody wanted to go to Africa to come down, and I went down with stepson Tim And we went down onto the field and said we wanted to go to Africa. My brother had been a missionary in Africa for 30 years. I'd never gone there, never thought of going there. Even then, that time I was just sitting waiting for the whole scene to end, and yet somehow I find myself going down. It was just a prompting of the Spirit, I guess. Went down, and from that experience, ended up going to Africa, living in Africa, having gone there now 9 times or 10 times, establishing a lot of relationships with little babies and children and orphans and high school orphans. But it all started with that time, and I wasn't even going to go to that conference because I'd been so many conferences. I must have been 65 or something age-wise. I didn't want to go, but my name somehow got put on it, so I ended up going, and that's what changed at least the last part of my life.
Yeah, really a huge ripple effect.
That was the biggest one of all my experiences.
Yeah. And what what are you the most, or what I guess are the most important lessons that you've learned, I guess, in your time as a pastor?
Well, I think preaching, people would think, is probably one of the most important.
Yeah.
I found in my pastorate that pastoral care is the most important. You need to identify with your people who have all kinds of challenges, all kinds of difficulties, and just they need a pastor. Preaching, you can hear, you can be a good preacher, and they can listen to a good sermon, but normally that sermon can be forgotten by the next Sunday, because I can think back, what did I preach last Sunday? If I can't remember it, how can they remember it? But they'll always remember your caring heart, that you are a pastor to them. If they walk through something and you were there for them, or you identified with them, you cared for them, you greeted them, you engaged with them. I think that was the most important part of ministry, and I still think it is today. Unless you can engage with people, identify with them, try to become with them what they're going through. That it's otherwise I think preaching is more sterile, whereas pastoral care is very personal. So I've always and that's why I guess my name, they call me Pastor Bill. Because I think I identified as pastor.
And then what would be your advice as someone who has lived his life as a pastor, knowing that our country is divided politically, sometimes religiously, even in our family, some of us being Catholic, some of us being Protestant, in our own homes, in our own country, in our own communities? How do you think we can come together, and what do you think, from your perspective as a pastor?
Well, I probably don't model this too well, as my wife would say. But I think that we have to learn to be able to discuss without being able to, push forward so strongly your opinion that you never can have a discussion. And today you don't have that. People can't discuss. They can't just sit down and engage in discussion from both sides. That's it. It's almost impossible. Right? That would be the thing that would bring harmony and unity, but that doesn't happen. That's the main thing you need. If you don't have that, you can have the best argument that you could put forward. You could debate it, but if you don't have where there's a common ground of sharing together and understanding each other and caring for one another and the other opinion they have. And that's hard to do, because when you have an opinion, you want to say it, and you want to say it strongly, and you want to make sure your opinion is heard, and the other person does too. So you're always in conflict, and you're not in agreement.
So maybe learning to respect and listen to each other and discussing
Danielle,
things.
You put it just right.
Just synthesizing what you said. And then how about from your marriages and relationships, like with Myrna, and then she passed away, and then my grandma, what would you say are the lessons that you've learned from your marriages?
Again, I think that the most important thing is being able to engage in a relationship
Yeah.
together of caring for one another, being more low key in a
Yes.
marriage. You know, you don't have to force any opinions on the other person.
Hmm.
Again, that only creates conflict. Every time you try to force something on or your opinion, it creates conflict. And so I would say, and this comes from me as a pastor, that a pastoral care approach in a marriage
Yes,
is
yeah.
probably the thing that'll keep you together in a marriage, because pastoral care is compassion, kindness, understanding, walking together, walking through. And if you have a pastoral heart, I think that pastoral heart will come through in a marriage relationship, and
Yeah.
that will bring love, peace, and harmony.
Yeah.
Because love is the root of it all, as we know when we get married, that's the basis. But love comes about because of a compassionate heart
Yeah.
and walking together pastorally.
Yeah, I'm gonna remember that. My future husband's lucky because I'm getting really good advice right now. Describe your first date with my grandma, Harriet.
Wow, let's see. I don't know if it's a first date, but the first time we really got together was in Denver, and we went to a barbecue place, Bennett's Barbecue Place, and that was where we sat. We had known each other through high school, because my first wife, Myrna, was one of her best friends in high school, so
Yeah.
we knew each other. And when my first wife passed away, we got in contact again,
Yeah.
Harriet and I, and your grandma and me, and that time we just sat and talked about old times, because we'd been in high school together. We knew each other through even some common dates that we had.
Double
But,
dates.
yeah, that was 35 years before that, or 30 years before that.
Wow.
So it was 30 years since we really had engaged much, because of I moved away to California,
Yeah.
and your grandma, had married and had gone and stayed in Denver, and I was in California with Myrna. So we knew each other from high school, but we didn't reconnect probably until that time at Bennett's Barbecue. And we spent time just talking together and getting acquainted again together, and knowing we had so much in common.
Yeah, shared history
Shared
and values.
history,
Mhm.
yeah.
And can you tell me about a difficult moment in your life?
Well, I think that, when your first wife has
Yeah.
pancreatic cancer, and you walk that journey with her, which was longer than most pancreatic cancer victims. It was 15 months. So we were in and out of cancer treatment, therapy, chemo, radiation, surgery. So that's a long walk, 15 months.
Yeah.
But through it all, I found that she was the inspiration more than I was, because she walked as she usually lived her life, very gently, very humbly, and she was the one that guided us as a family. We had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. The 2 girls were married, and the son wasn't, and she guided us all through in a way that I think as a family we were able to go the journey with her much easier, because of who she was,
Yeah.
rather than who we were.
Wow.
So that's probably the most difficult.
Yeah.
There's always difficulties in our challenges in dealing with situations in a church. There's
Oh, I'm sure.
very difficult deaths that you have to deal with, and deal with going to the parents and working through them. And the very first death that I encountered was a young man in his early 30s. He had 3 little teeny little children. I think it's 4, 5, and 6 or something like that. died unexpectedly of a heart attack. He was only in his 30s. And I got the word first and had to go tell his wife that I just got word that he had died of a heart attack.
Oh gosh.
And that was my very first experience as a pastor. So that was, I still kind of feel the shakes because of that.
Yeah.
Having to do that, that's the most difficult thing in the world to do.
I can't imagine.
So a lot of things pastorally that you deal with people
Are difficult.
things that will always be a part of your life, that were challenges and things that brought you a lot of hurt and pain along with them.
Yeah. Yeah. But like you said, it's just walking through those difficult times together. Yeah. Can you, so I think, how old was I when you came into my life? 6 years old?
Yeah, well, it was 25 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was pretty young. So to me, you've always just been my grandpa. So what's one of your favorite memories, I guess, of me?
Of you?
Yeah.
Just meeting you and then doing some things with you, like.
My grandma's in the background and she's trying to interject. Grandma, this is not your interview.
Well, we took car trips together. That was good. Of course, I think one of them was, I got to baptize you as a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how old you were then, but
I was older. I was
you
like,
were older,
yeah,
because if I was, you were probably what?
elementary school, like
Yeah.
first grade or something.
5, 6, or 7,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Little girl standing there and being able to baptize you.
Yeah, I remember.
That's pretty, that's pretty special for me coming into the family.
Yeah,
And
that was special
and
for
then
me
just,
too.
Just you're the best with your sweet smile, and my goodness, what could I say? We traveled together.
I know,
And
those are
we-
some of my favorite memories of you, is just traveling with
We
you.
sang together. I taught you all these old country western songs,
Yeah.
and Johnny Cash, and of the car song, tooling down the highway doing 79. I'm a twin pipe popping, I'm
and
feeling
feeling
fine.
fine.
Dig that,
Daddy
daddy,
was
was at a red stop sign. Crash! Transfusion. My red corpuscle are in mass confusion. I'm never gonna speed again. Slip the juice to me, Bruce. Put the blood in me, bud. See, we laughed together about
yeah.
that now.
I know. We have great memories.
Those trips were really great. They were wonderful times together.
I know, some of my favorite memories with you too is just Bronco games and
Yeah.
talking about the Broncos, eating chili after the games, going to the games, seeing how excited you are to go to the games.
Yeah, we've had some great times that way, traveling together, Bronco games together,
Yeah.
family times together.
Oh yeah, holidays.
Yeah.
So many good memories.
So many, and very, very good memories.
Yeah. How has your life been different than how you thought it would be when you were young?
Well, I didn't think I'd be a pastor,
Yeah,
for
that's
one
true.
thing,
Yeah.
and that kind of surprised me. Surprised by joy and fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something I never expected, because I was so shy.
Yeah.
Very, very shy person, and to think I would ever stand up in front and be able to preach sermons and be a pastor is still something I can't comprehend.
Yeah.
I think that's the one that just stands out.
The main thing. And then thinking about your family many generations from now, knowing that they may listen to this recording someday, what do you want to say to them? Any wisdom or advice you'd like to share? What would you like to say to them?
Please love on people, and don't try and just put yourself first all the time. Learn to care for them, to just show you care for them, to engage with them positively. Love them, and love them some more. You never can do that enough. And again, I can almost say the same thing as I said about marriage. Have a pastoral care heart for everybody, and including family members, siblings, all as you grow up. Care for each other, TLC, tender loving care, and set an example to yourself of that kind of thing. Be a godly, also parent or a godly child to learn to walk in the ways of the Lord. My favorite texts are to love kindness and to do justice and to walk humbly with your God, to learn how to have a compassionate heart to take care of the needy, the disenfranchised. That's more important than listening to a lot of sermons, and be service oriented in the way that Christ would want you to be. And I think the passage that always is the most important. I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was in prison, you visited me, and I was sick and you came unto me. Well done, good and faithful servant. And if you, as generations beyond, can say, I did that, you model Christ. When you model Christ like that with the poor and the needy, then you've modeled him the way you want. And your words will be, well done, good and faithful servant.
That's beautiful. How would you like to be remembered?
The same way.
As someone who did that.
The same way that he cared for people. And I think that I'd like to be remembered kind of as a good guy that had a lot of fun. I like to have fun. As you well know, Danielle, we tell a lot of little stories on each other. We just have a good time like that. That makes life. If you're too serious and if you're too somber all the time, no, I want to be known as kind of the old good guy that can share a few jokes and enjoy life. And he walked the way he talked.
Yeah.
And that would be it. Just be known as that good guy.
I think you got that covered.
And that song that we always say, I fell down into a burning ring of fire.
I love that song.
And that's hopefully a burning fire of love,
Yeah.
that spreads out to everybody, and they can say that about me. He loved me.
Yeah. I'll be able to say that.
Thank you, Danielle. I say that to you too, and all the grandkids. It's been a great joy.
Oh, it's been a wonderful joy.
And a love, and you're a love.
You're a love. Are you proud of me, Grandpa?
Very proud. I mean, I couldn't be any prouder of you. The way you're walking, the life you're living, your Christianity, the style of life, what you've chosen to do in life, moving ahead with your doctorate, a great student. I listened to you when you taught at Regis. Man, you were right on. You were sparkling up there, and I sparkled within because you sparkled with those kids and they loved you. And, you have modeled the kind of grandchild that I would want, because you modeled Christ, and you modeled joy and fun and enthusiasm, and you just model what it would be for a person to be one, I think, of whom Christ is proud.
Thank you, Grandpa.
And I love you, and he loves you too. And that's the key thing.
Yeah, I love you too.
I love you too.
Well, thank you. You've just, to end our interview, I just want to tell you how much you mean to me, and a reason that my life is that way and I've been able to be that person is because of you, and how you've modeled your life and how you've loved and lived. So thank you for teaching me how to have joy, how to laugh, how to have fun, and how to love. So you mean so much
that says it all. Thank you. Thank you, my girl.
You mean so much to me. I love you, Grandpa.
Love you. Oh, yes.